Rain slid down the windows of a tailor shop that had gone dark years ago. 9:30, a hexagonal cast iron base steadied a mannequin in the front display, the yellowed fabric of its cover softened by decades of dust. On the sidewalk outside, a young woman stood in a soaked jacket hatchback packed to the roof behind her. $43 in her account, a brass key trembling in her palm. She pushed through the resistant door past three metal buckets, catching a slow ceiling drip, past a repair ticket book left open on the counter, and stopped in front of that mannequin. Her fingertips traced the shoulder, then the arm, then the torso. Halfway down the right side, they caught on something. A seam, diagonal, sewn by hand, and beneath the cloth the sharp edge of something flat, stiff, rectangular. She did not move. My grandmother had been dead for 28 days when I found the thing she had hidden inside the mannequin. I was standing alone in her tailor shop at 9:30 at night. Rain tapped the front windows in slow, tired hits. The building smelled like wet plaster and old wool and the ghost of machine oil. I had $43 in my checking account, a sleeping bag in the trunk of my hatchback, a brass key in my palm that my brother had slid across the dining room table 3 hours earlier, like he was doing me a favor. Take it before somebody throws it away. That was what he had told me. Not asked, told. I had not cried at the funeral. I had not cried when the lawyer read the settlement, but standing there running my hand along the dusty shoulder of the dress form in her front window, I felt something shift beneath my fingers, something hard, something rectangular, something that should not have been inside a hollow fabric shape. I looked closer. There, tucked under the right arm, was a seam, a diagonal seam sewn by hand, stitched shut with the same careful backward lock stitch my grandmother had taught me when I was 7 years old. And I understood right then that Grandma Odessa had left me something the rest of the family did not know about, something she had hidden 3 years before she died, something she wanted only me to find. But that came later. Let me start with the key. The brass key sat on my grandmother's dining room table between a coffee-stained folder and a plate of cold funeral chicken nobody had touched. My brother Weldon slid it toward me with 2 fingers, like he was passing a check to a waitress he did not plan to see again. He told me I should probably take it before somebody threw it away. I was 23 years old. I had $43 in my checking account, a sleeping bag in the trunk of my hatchback, and no place to sleep that night. But nobody at that table knew, because I had not told them. Because you do not tell your family you are broke when they have already decided you are the one who gives, not the one who takes. The key had a paper tag tied around it. Grandma Odessa's handwriting faded, but still hers. New 14 Sparrow Lane. I did not pick it up, not yet. Aunt Marceline sat at the head of the table, 55 years old, reading glasses low on her nose, a folder open in front of her like a Bible she had read too many times. She was the executor, the one Grandma had chosen, the one who had spent a month sorting bills and answering phone calls from people who thought executors knew everything. Marceline did not know everything. She knew enough to want signatures. She corrected me before I had even opened my mouth to argue. The shop was not being thrown away. It was part of the settlement. Weldon leaned back in Grandma's chair, 30 years old, already picking out furniture in his head, already deciding what would stay and what would go. The flowered curtains gone, the china cabinet gone, the mantel clock that ran slow, gone. He clarified he had meant it figuratively, though the flowered curtains could stay, for now. Rain tapped the windows, slow, tired, like it had been at it since morning. I looked at the papers. The paper said Weldon would get the house, the paid-off house, the house with the working stove and the roof that did not leak, and whatever cash was left after the medical bills and the funeral costs. I would get the tailor shop and all its unwanted contents. I read that phrase twice, all its unwanted contents, like 54 years of Grandma's whole working life had been reduced to a legal category. Like every pin and thread and pressed hem had been sorted into a bin marked unwanted. I asked Marceline what would happen if I did not sign. Marceline pressed her lips together. She had a way of doing that when the answer was going to cost somebody something. Then she walked me through it. Continued probate, longer everything, attorney bills that kept running, the shop still needing insurance, taxes, emergency repairs. Weldon jumped in and told me to come on. The place was a liability. Everyone agreed on that. Nobody agreed on that. Grandma had not agreed on that. Grandma had spent 54 years agreeing on the opposite. But she was not at the table anymore, so her opinion did not count. I picked up the key, just held it in my palm, felt the weight of it. Small, heavier than it should have been. And then I remembered the phone call. 3 months ago, I was folding sweaters at the department store. My phone buzzed in my back pocket. I answered without looking because I already knew. Junebug, she called me. Her voice was thin, like paper that had been folded too many times. She told me not to let them separate me from the shop. I stopped folding, asked her what she meant. She coughed, took a sip of something. Water, maybe. Tea. I heard the glass touch the wood of her nightstand. Then she told me to come see her when I got off work. I did not go. My manager asked me to cover a shift. Rent was due. I needed the money. I told myself I would go the next day, and then the next day, and then 2 days passed. And by the time I made it to her house, Marceline was there. Grandma was asleep. The conversation never happened. She slipped after that. Slower, quieter. She still knew who I was, but she never talked about the shop again. Not to me, not once. She died on a Tuesday morning in October. I was not in the room. I do not know if you can carry a regret that big and still walk upright. I have been trying. Marceline's voice pulled me back. She asked if I was all right. I told her I was reading. I was not reading. I was thinking about my grandmother's last words to me, and the shift I had picked up at a store that was already dying, and the day I would never get back. Weldon tapped his fingers on the table and told me there was nothing to read. It was a shop. It was falling down. I would sign, I would leave, we would all move on. I looked up at him and told him Grandma had said not to let anyone separate me from it. He shrugged that off. Grandma had said a lot of things. I held his eyes and reminded him she had said that one to me. He rolled his eyes, actually rolled them, like we were 12, told me fine she wanted me connected to it. Congratulations, I was connected sign. I looked at Marceline. She looked away. That was when I knew something was wrong. Not big wrong, not yet. Just the kind of wrong you feel when the person supposed to protect you cannot hold eye contact. I picked up the pen. I did not sign. I told them I wanted to add a line. Marceline blinked at me over her reading glasses. I told her the line. Every key, every drawer, every scrap of fabric, every single item inside the shop becomes mine the moment I sign. Not next week, not after probate closes. Today. Weldon laughed. Short, ugly. Then he threw a question at me, mocking, asking if I thought there was treasure in there. I held his eyes, told him I wanted it in writing. Marceline took the pen from me, wrote the line herself, slid the folder to Weldon for initials. He hesitated, which was the second thing that felt wrong. Because if there really was nothing in the shop, he would not have hesitated. He initialed. I signed. Somewhere in the house, an old clock struck 2. Slow, off by a few minutes. Grandma had refused to fix that clock for as long as I could remember. She said clocks that were slightly wrong reminded her that time did not own her. I stood up. Weldon reached for Grandma's mug, the one with the blue measuring tapes painted around the rim. He held it like it already belonged to him. I asked Marceline for the envelope with the rest of the keys. She gave it to me. 6 keys inside. Front, rear, upstairs, office, cloth room, courtyard gate, courtyard gate. I looked at that tag twice. I did not remember a courtyard gate, not from being 7 and sorting buttons on a stool, Not from being 15 and helping Grandma press hems on prom dresses for girls whose mothers could not afford the shop across town. Not from any single memory I had of that building, but I had one now. I drove to the shop in the rain. My hatchback was packed so tight the rear window was useless. Two plastic bins of clothes, a lamp lying across the back seat, a rolled sleeping bag, and two cardboard boxes from the apartment my landlord had told me to clear out by 6 that evening. I had turned in the apartment key 3 days ago. I had not told my family. I had not told anyone, because there is a version of you that people believe in. And when that version starts to crack, you do not want to be there when they find out. The shop stood between a closed insurance office and a brick storefront used for storage. The painted sign had faded from green to gray. Odessa's alterations, since 1969. One quarter of the sign hung lower than the other. A slip of paper was taped inside the front door. Unsafe for occupancy. Pending repairs. I sat in the car with the wipers going. The building looked ashamed, like it knew what it had cost her, like it was apologizing for still standing. I took a breath. I got out. The front lock resisted. I pushed with my shoulder. Something scraped across the floor inside. I squeezed through the opening. The smell hit me first. Damp plaster, dust, old wool. And underneath all of it, that faint machine oil smell I remembered from being 7 years old, sitting on a stool sorting buttons by color while Grandma hummed something slow. A ceiling tile had fallen behind the door. I nudged it with my foot, found the light switch. Nothing. I used my phone flashlight. The front counter was still there, the wooden thread rack, the rolling mirror with the crack in the corner, garment bags along the wall gray with dust, 3 metal buckets on the floor. Rainwater hit one of them with a hollow tap, then another tap, then another. I walked deeper. Hello. The word came out before I could stop it, which was stupid, because nobody was supposed to be there, except somebody was. A gray head rose slowly from behind a cabinet near the cutting tables, followed by a lined face and 2 raised hands. He warned me not to swing the flashlight at him. He was too old to defend himself and too stiff to duck. My heart was in my throat. I asked who he was. Everett Kilroy. The name arrived a half-second before the memory did. Grandma had mentioned him for years. Her old partner. Retired 6 or 7 years ago. I had seen him at the funeral, but we had not spoken. I explained he had been trying to find the water shut-off. The roof had started leaking harder that morning. My aunt had called him. Then she had told him she could not authorize repairs until the papers were signed, which had left him standing in here watching the ceiling drop or trying to slow it down. He had picked the second one. He was 68, broad through the shoulders, soaked down one sleeve, looked at me the way people look at animals they do not want to spook. I told him the papers were signed. He lowered his hand slowly, looked at me for a long moment, asked who got the shop. I told him I did. He did not smile, did not nod, did not congratulate me, just told me he was sorry. I almost laughed, told him that was what everyone said. A heavier stream of water hit the bucket behind me. Everett glanced at the ceiling and warned me that if we did not clear that roof drain, I would lose more plaster before dark. I told him I did not have money to hire him. He told me he had not asked for money, opened a low cabinet, pulled out a rusted wrench. I looked at his wet sleeve and figured he had already gone up there. He confirmed it. He had gotten as far as the ladder. Then his knee had reminded him of their arrangement. He did not climb wet ladders. His knee did not bend when he asked nicely. I looked at him, really looked. This man had known my grandmother for 30 years. He had shown up in a rainstorm on the day her shop passed to a stranger. And he had started fixing things without being asked. I told him to show me the drain. We went through the rear workroom. Everett knew which floorboard shifted, which door needed lifting before it would open. The back door led to a covered loading step and a courtyard, enclosed by old brick walls, weeds through the pavement, A metal gate facing the alley locked with an orange padlock. Against the rear wall, a ladder reached the low roof. I looked up into the rain. He told me quietly I did not have to do this today. I thought of Weldon sitting in Grandma's chair. I thought of the $43 in my account. I thought of the sleeping bag in my car. I put my hands on the ladder and asked him to hold it steady. The roof drain was packed with leaves and mud and torn cloth. Everett handed me a broken ruler. I cleared the drain by inches. Water pulled free with a deep sucking sound and rushed down the spout. Inside, the steady stream slowed to separate drops. Everett placed a fresh bucket underneath it. I climbed down, soaked, cold, alive in a way I had not been in months. He looked at me and observed that we had bought a little time. The word we caught in my throat. He shrugged and did not answer. We went back inside. I stood in front of the display window. The dress form was still there, same as I remembered. A dressmaker's mannequin covered in yellowed fabric wearing a torn plastic garment bag over its torso. One shoulder slightly lower than the other, a hexagonal cast iron base that looked heavy enough to break a foot. I pulled the garment bag off. Dust lifted from the mannequin's shoulder like something waking up. I turned Grandma's old sign around. Not to open, just away from closed. Everett watched me and pointed out that was not the same as opening. I acknowledged it. He agreed, told me the city knew too. I pushed wet hair off my face and asked if there was any part of this building that would not get me in trouble. He offered the bathroom sink. It had worked in March, only cold water, less encouraging. He led me to the electrical panel. It was hidden behind rolls of brown patterned paper. Grandma had never thrown away a usable inch of anything. She had saved wrapping paper after Christmas. She had saved the tape if it still had some stick to it. Everett moved the rolls carefully. He opened the panel. Most of the labels had faded, but Grandma had written new ones on strips of cloth tape. Front lights, workroom, presses, upstairs, rear exterior. 2 breakers were switched off. I asked if the city had done that. He shook his head. He had. After the leak reached the back fixture, Grandma had argued with him for 20 minutes. Then when he was not looking, she had turned them back on. Twice, that sounded like her. Everett flipped the front breaker. A row of ceiling lights flickered. One tube buzzed and stayed dark, but 4 others came on. The cold light showed every stain, every cobweb, every piece of fallen plaster. The shop was worse when I could see it. He read my face and murmured that lights were rude at first, then wondered aloud if the room improved. The room did, I told him, if somebody worked. I found a broom behind the fitting curtain. The handle had been repaired with black cloth tape. Grandma had repaired everything with black cloth tape. I swept plaster into a pile. Everett moved buckets. Neither of us talked about what I was going to do with the building. I did not have a plan beyond keeping the roof from dropping onto anything I might sell. I found her everyday machine first. A black straight stitch model set into a heavy oak table. I pulled the vinyl cover off. The cabinet creaked. Everett came over and warned me not to force the treadle. I told him I was not. He noted I had been thinking about it. I looked at him. He crouched carefully, worked the pedal with one hand. The belt turned stiff, then smoother. I asked if this was hers. He confirmed it. Her everyday machine. The fancy one in the office was for buttonholes. I ran a finger across the metal plate. Dust came away in a clean line. I asked if I could sell it. He stayed crouched. I could. I asked how much. He shrugged. It depended who bought it. Someone who wanted furniture might pay more than someone who understood it. That made no sense to me. He agreed most prices did not. He stood, one hand on the table for balance. I waited for him to tell me not to sell it. He did not. I asked what he would do. He told me he would oil it. I told him that did not answer the question. He gave me a small, tired smile. Said it answered the question he was willing to answer today. I left the machine covered. We cleared enough floor to reach the stairs. The first tread groaned under my foot. Everett made me wait while he tested the handrail. Told me I did not need to inspect every inch tonight. I told him I needed to know whether I could sleep here. His hand stopped on the rail. Then he told me I could not. I pointed out I had not asked whether the city approved. He replied he was not the city, which meant I said he did not have to approve. He looked past me at the plastic bins visible through the front window, the sleeping bag, the lamp lying across the back seat. He understood, suggested there was a motel near the highway. I asked with what money. He did not answer. I climbed the stairs. The upstairs hallway had two small rooms on one side and a larger room facing the street. The larger room held cardboard boxes under plastic sheets. Ceiling dry. Floor level. The first small room had a metal bed frame. No mattress. The second had a desk, a lamp, and three dress forms crowded together like people waiting for a bus. I tried the lamp. Nothing. Everett stood in the doorway, suggested the bulb might be dead. I unscrewed it, took one from the hallway fixture, screwed it in. Warm light filled the room. I told him that outlet worked. He agreed. One did. It was a small fact, but I felt like I could put my weight on it. I called Marceline from the front counter, told her I was staying at the shop. She protested. I told her Everett was there. She protested again. Then she asked quietly why I had not told her the apartment situation was this bad. I told her I had. She reminded me I had told her I was staying with someone. I stuck to my story. Her sister had come into town. Marceline went quiet. That quiet that meant she was doing math in her head, figuring out where her responsibility started and stopped. Then she told me to come get sheets. She would meet me at the house. I asked if they were mine. Her voice tightened. They were sheets, June. Everett across the room raised one finger without turning around. Weldon's truck was in the driveway when I pulled up to Grandma's house. The garage door was open. Cardboard boxes lined the wall. He had started before the ink dried. Marceline met me in the kitchen. Two grocery bags on the counter. Sheets, towels, canned soup, crackers, coffee, toilet paper, a flashlight, batteries. Weldon came through the hall carrying Grandma's mug, the blue measuring tape one, asked what food. Marceline gestured at the counter. Things from the pantry, she explained. He objected. They belonged with the house. She stared at him, reminded him it was canned soup. He set the mug on the counter harder than necessary, told me I had signed the agreement. He was trying to keep the lines clear. I told him the lines were clear. His canned beans were safe. Marceline said my name. A warning, a correction. There it was, the old correction. Weldon pushed. I reacted. Marceline said my name. Same script since I was 10. I lifted the bags, asked where Grandma's sewing box was. Weldon's face changed. He asked which one. I told him the wooden one with her initials. He claimed he had packed it for the house. I reminded him it was in the house sometimes. It was at the shop other times. He shrugged. Same difference. I asked if I could have it. He looked at Marceline, waiting for her to decide so he could refuse without looking ungenerous. Marceline opened a box beside the refrigerator, pulled out a shallow wooden case. Grandma's initials carved into the lid. Deep, old. Grandma had done it herself years ago with a knife and steady hands. I thanked her. Weldon folded his arms, warned me it might be worth something. I dared him to name a price. He would not. I was not selling it. He pointed out I had just said it might be worth something. I reminded him that was not the point. I understood. The box was not valuable to Weldon until I wanted it. The moment I asked, it became part of the pile he was defending. For years I had handled him with softness. Waited. Let Marceline smooth things over. I had called that keeping the family together. But I had been training them, teaching them my needs could wait. I picked up the box and told them it went with the shop. Weldon stepped between me and the door. Not close enough to threaten, close enough to make me stop. Warned me I did not get to rewrite the agreement. I told him I was not. Grandma had carried this box between both places. Marceline put a hand on the counter, told him softly she had found it in the pantry with shop receipts inside. Weldon turned. When? After she went to the hospital, Marceline said. He shot back that she had never told him. She shot back that he had never asked. Marceline took the box from me, opened it, lifted the top tray. Underneath a stack of old repair tickets bearing the shop address. She handed the box back, told him it belonged with the business contents. Weldon moved aside. I left without waiting for him to change his mind. Back at the shop, I found the folding cot behind the cloth room shelves, exactly where Everett had said. I opened it. One leg was shorter than the others. I folded a piece of cardboard underneath it. I made the bed with Grandma's clean sheets. Then I carried the sewing box downstairs, placed it beside the black machine, opened the bottom compartment. Under the repair tickets, I found Grandma's small oil bottle, a note written on the back of an envelope. Her handwriting slower than I remembered, but still hers. Front machine pulls left, clean first. Do not blame the needle. I read it twice, then a third time, because I could hear her voice saying it. Underneath the oil bottle, I found something else. A business card, half burned along one edge, like someone had held it too close to a candle. The paper was cream-colored. The lettering was raised. Regional Costume Cooperative. R. Farrier, a phone number. Behind the card in Grandma's handwriting, a note on a strip of receipt paper. This girl called 3 times. Have not called back yet. I sat with the card in my hand for a long moment. I did not know who R. Farrier was. I did not know why my grandmother had held a business card close enough to a candle to burn its edge. I did not know why she had kept it, or why she had noted the 3 calls without returning any of them. I set the card next to the oil bottle. I would think about it in the morning. I removed the vinyl cover, brushed the dust from the machine, opened the oil bottle, followed her instructions. The oil darkened the cloth as it lifted years of dust from the gears. I did not know yet whether I would keep this machine, or this shop, or any of it. But for the first time that day, I did something to the building that was not about stopping damage. I cleaned it. I pressed the treadle. The machine pulled left, exactly as she had warned. I cleaned under the feed dogs with a narrow brush from her box. A knot of blue thread came free. After that, the wheel turned without resistance. I found a scrap of cotton on the cutting table, fed it beneath the presser foot. The first line wandered, the second held straight. By the fourth, the stitches were even enough that Grandma might have nodded before finding something else to correct. I sat back. The rain had softened. Water still dropped into the bucket, but with several quiet seconds between each one. I carried the scrap upstairs, left it on the desk beside the lamp. Proof of very little. But I wanted to see it when I woke up. I slept in my clothes. Everett knocked on the glass at 8 the next morning. Travel mug in one hand, canvas tool bag in the other. I came down in socks. He looked past me at the blanket wrapped around my shoulders, noted my car was outside. I confirmed it. He observed I had stayed. I nodded. Told him the ceiling had stayed too. So far, he brought biscuits, plain and egg and cheese, handed me the egg and cheese, told me it had not been a real choice. I agreed with him. He walked to the machine, noticed the clean plate, the oil bottle, the missing cotton scrap. Observed I had gotten it running. I corrected him gently. It had already been running. It had needed cleaning. He liked that answer. Told me so. Then he asked if I had read the note. I had. He liked that too. We spent the morning on his workbench. It stood in the rear room. The top was scarred by blades and chalk and hot irons. One drawer had swollen shut. Everett removed it, carried it beneath the front lights. Told me my grandmother had spilled tea in there, twice, and that I had not moved the cup. I told him I had tried. She had said a cup had a right to sit where it was useful. I sanded the swollen edge while he cleaned rust from the runners. Somewhere in the middle of it, without meaning to, I said the thing that had been sitting in my throat for a month. I told him I had not come. Everett did not look up. Asked me when. 3 months before I told him. She had called and told me not to let them separate me from the shop, and I had not gone. I had picked up a shift instead. Everett kept working on the drawer, told me I had needed the money. I told him I had needed her more. He was quiet for a moment. Then he told me she had not been ready to leave. I knew. Neither had I, he added. I knew that too. He murmured that was the part people did not say. I looked at him. He kept sanding. We fit the drawer back into the bench. It slid smoothly, stopped, closed flush. Everett pulled it open again just to make sure, nodded once. Then he asked if I wanted to know what he thought. I did. I told me she would have called again if she had needed to. She had not called again because she was tired, not because I had not come. I could not answer that, so I did not. We ate biscuits at the counter. I opened Grandma's repair ticket book. Her last entry was 7 months before her death. A jacket sleeve, $12, a note in the margin, customer talks with hands, leave room at the elbow. I asked how many people had come here. Before she stopped, Everett chewed slowly, enough to keep her busy 2 or 3 days a week. I asked why Marceline had not known. Because it had not been making money, he explained. It had been taking in money. There was a difference. I turned another page. Work trousers, choir robes, a funeral dress, sleeves shortened for someone who had lost weight. Someone had kept coming. After the sign faded, after the roof began leaking, after the notices went up. That did not make the shop profitable, but it meant it had not become useless, not the way Weldon said it had. I looked at Everett and asked who our farrier was. His head came up. He wanted to know where I had seen that name. I showed him the card, told him about the note, about the 3 calls. Everett set his coffee down, explained that the Regional Costume Cooperative operated out of Springfield. They did stage costumes for theaters across 4 states. They needed cutting tables, storage, rooms that could hold pattern work while a build was running. I stared at the card. Grandma had known them. They had known her, he corrected. She had done piecework for them years ago. Then she had stopped. He had never asked why. Then he added quietly that if a farrier had called 3 times, it had not been to catch up. I did not know what that meant. Not yet. But I put the card in the front pocket of the sewing box, where I would not lose it. I walked out to the front counter, turned Grandma's old cardboard sign back to the fitting curtain side. I took a sheet of blank paper, wrote in careful letters, alterations, hems, buttons, simple repairs, by appointment. Everett read it, told me I needed a phone number. I added it. He told me I needed prices. I told him I needed to see the clothes first. He nudged. I needed people to know I would not hold their trousers hostage. I wrote basic hems starting at $14. He nodded approval. I taped the sign inside the front window, beneath the city notice, beside the old closed sign I had turned around the night before. The rain had stopped for the first time in 2 days. Sun came through the front glass at a low angle. It touched the dress form in the window, made the yellowed fabric look almost gold. I stood there for a moment, looking at that mannequin, thinking about seams, thinking about my grandmother's hands, thinking about a stitch you use when you want something to stay hidden. I did not know yet that I had already touched what she left me. That came in the afternoon. Around 2, I was pinning a customer's jacket sleeve at the door. An older gentleman named Mr. Kessler, quiet, widowed. He had walked in without an appointment, read my sign, asked if I could take up the sleeve of his church jacket before Sunday. I told him I could. He told me his wife used to do it. I offered him an apology. He waved it off, told me not to be sorry. She had been a fine seamstress. She would have liked knowing this place was still stitching. I quoted him $12. He paid me $16, told me to keep the 4 for cleaning supplies. I watched him walk to his car, slowly, one hand on the doorframe for balance. Then he drove off. I locked the front door, turned the sign to closed. Not because I was done, because I needed a quiet minute. I walked to the front window. The mannequin stood there, same as always. Yellowed fabric, slightly lower right shoulder, hexagonal cast iron base. I reached out, ran my hand along the shoulder, then down the arm, then across the torso, and halfway down the right side my fingertips caught on something. A seam, not the original side seam. That ran straight from the arm to the hip. Someone had opened part of it, folded the fabric inward, then closed it at a slant. Every 4 stitches locked backward through the previous hole. I knew that stitch. I had been 7 when she taught it to me, sitting on a stool in this same shop. She had held my small hand around a needle, told me this was the stitch you used when you wanted the thread to stay, when you wanted the seam to hold weight, when you wanted to hide something and only tell one person where you hid it. I pressed lightly along the seam. Halfway down my fingertips met the sharp edge of something flat and stiff and rectangular. Beneath the cloth, I did not move for a long time. I just stood there, in a shop nobody wanted, in a dress I had been living in for 2 days, in a life that had shrunk down to $43 in a folding cot. And I understood right then that my grandmother had left me something, something the family did not know about, something she had hidden 3 years before she died, something she wanted only me to find. I lowered the arm gently, picked up my phone, called Everett. He answered on the 5th ring, asked if the ceiling had come down. No. Asked if the toilet had quit. No. He observed I was ahead. I said his name. Something in my voice stopped him. He asked what was wrong. I told him there was something inside the mannequin. He did not respond for a moment. I asked if he had heard me. He had. Then carefully, he told me not to cut anything. I promised I was not going to. He reminded me I had been thinking about it. I looked at the sewing scissors on the counter. He was right. I asked if he could come back. I was halfway through lunch. I told him I would wait. He told me to move it somewhere dry, keep it upright. He would be there. He hung up. I carried the mannequin into the office, where the ceiling showed no water stains. The figure was heavier than it looked. The cast iron base made it want to tilt. I set it beside Grandma's desk, closed the office door. Then I stood there, listening to the rain that had started up again, listening to the rectangle. I thought about Grandma at some office 3 years ago, standing at a counter, signing a paper she would not tell anyone about. I thought about Marceline driving her somewhere, the same year. I did not know then how those pieces fit, but something in me already knew they did. I thought about the phrase in the sewing box, "Do not blame the needle." I thought about her voice on the phone 3 months before she died. "Do not let them separate you from the shop." I thought about the way Weldon had hesitated when I asked for that clause about all the contents. And I thought whatever is inside this mannequin, she put it there for me. And she waited 3 years for me to find it. I sat down on the office floor. I put my hand on the mannequin's shoe. And for the first time since she died, I said her name out loud. Grandma. The rain kept falling. The bucket kept catching. Somewhere outside, a car passed slowly on the wet street, and a diagonal seam waited under a fabric arm. In a shop nobody wanted to tell me the truth about. Everett came back inside of an hour. He did not ask questions. He did not take off his coat. He walked straight to the office door and stopped. Told me to show him where I had touched it. I opened the door. The mannequin stood next to Grandma's desk, right arm slightly lifted, the way I had left it, like it was waiting to be asked something. Everett set his tool bag on the desk, pulled out a small lamp with a magnifying lens, plugged it in. The bulb warmed slowly. I told him, under the arm. He crouched, angled the lens. For a long moment he did not speak. Then without looking at me, he called me over. I came. He tilted the lens toward me. Under the light, the diagonal seam was clearer than it had been in the front room. The original side seam ran straight from the arm to the hip. Somebody had opened part of it, folded the fabric inward, then sewn it closed at a slant. Every 4 stitches passed backward through the previous hole. Everett recognized that stitch, told me so. I asked how. Because he had spent 30 years taking it out. I stared at him. He did not smile. Explained she had used it when she could not get something under a machine. Curtain lining, coat sleeves, stuffed forms, a straight hand stitch she had said opened too easily. So she had used the lock, which meant she had opened this. He agreed. Why, I asked. He pressed 2 fingers around the stiff rectangle beneath the cloth, did not push directly on it, sketched the shape in the air. About this size, envelope maybe, or a pattern card, or a thin book. I reached for the seam. He moved my hand aside, reminded me it belonged to me. I acknowledged it, then asked why he was stopping me. Because that fabric was dry enough to split, he explained. 1 stitch cut wrong direction, the whole side would open. Whatever was in there would drop into the base. I sat back on my heels. He was not going to let me rush this, which was maybe the reason Grandma had left him behind. Because I could not do it alone. Because I would have cut it that first night. Because I would have torn her repair apart to see what was inside. He was not going to let me be that person. Not yet. I asked what we should do. He looked at the mannequin, then at me, laid it out, stabilized the cover, loosened the base, open it from below if we could, and if we could not cut the repair, 1 stitch at a time. I asked how long that would take. As long as it takes, he told me. I wanted to argue, but I could not, because he was right. We turned the mannequin over slowly, together, laid an old cotton sheet under the base. 4 flathead screws held a round metal plate to the iron stand. Rust covered the slots. Everett tried the first one. It did not move. He looked up at me. Prescribed penetrating oil. 48 hours, maybe 72. That was a long time to wait. He warned me it was not the waiting that was hard. I asked what was. Not touching, he answered. He was right about that too. He applied a drop of oil to each screw. We carried the mannequin upstairs to the dry room, set it on the sheet under the lamp where nothing could fall on it. Tomorrow, he told me. I nodded. Except tomorrow another paper arrived. Slid under the front door sometime before dawn. City letterhead. Bold black print at the top. Notice of accelerated review. The building had been added to a demolition hazard list for the county's spring public safety cycle. I had 28 days to submit an approved repair plan. 28 days to prove the shop could be saved. 28 days. If I missed the deadline, the building would be dressed with the second notice. The kind that stayed. The kind that let the county schedule its own crew and its own dumpster and its own morning to knock down what my grandmother had spent 54 years holding up. I stood at the counter reading the notice 3 times. Everett came in at 8, saw my face, and did not need to ask. He read the number aloud once quietly. 28 days. He set the coffee down, looked at the ceiling, then at the mannequin upstairs waiting under its cotton sheet with 4 screws soaking in oil. Then he said the thing I had been trying not to think. We were going to have to move fast, he told me, and slow, at the same time. I did not answer, because outside the rain had started again, and somewhere in the walls a pipe I had not noticed yet was beginning to drip, and a rectangle waited under a fabric arm, and the clock had started counting down. 28 days. I wrote it on the front counter chalkboard where Grandma used to write the pickup dates for wedding alterations. I did not underline it. I did not draw a box around it. I just wrote the number, because a number that big does not need decoration. Everett came in at 8:15 with 2 coffees and a legal pad. He set them down, looked at the chalkboard, did not comment. Then he flipped the pad open and wrote a list. Roof, electrical, firewall, bathroom, exterior lighting, rear gate, structural report. I read it upside down, pointed out that was not 28 days of work. That was 4 months of work. A section of the back wall swung inward. Not a room. A deep drawer built into the wall cavity, perhaps 18 inches deep and 2 feet wide, lined in cedar. The cedar smell came out as soon as the drawer opened, sharp and clean. Inside folders, each labeled in Raymond's handwriting, arranged chronologically. She found the folder with her name on it near the back. She took it to the kitchen table and opened it under the light. He shrugged. Then we would sell the buttonhole machine. I looked at him, reminded him that machine was worth $900. He shrugged again. And I had 43. 943 was closer to what I needed than 43 alone. The math was ugly, but it was math. I called the bank on a Wednesday morning, told them who I was, told them what I had: a shop building, a tax record, a 28-day city notice, a plan being drafted, a tenant maybe, a former customer who had brought me $16 and left 4 extra for cleaning supplies. The woman on the other end was patient in the way people are patient when they know they are going to disappoint you slowly. She offered me an appointment on Thursday. Bring the deed, 2 years of tax records, the notice, anything I could put my hands on that made me look like a person who paid things back. I promised I would. I hung up, wrote it on the chalkboard beneath the 28. Day 22. Bank. Everett was in the back room lifting a broken shelf off a stack of pattern books. He heard the chalk scrape, asked if I was writing the whole schedule on that thing. I told him I was. He wanted to know if I wanted people to see it. I wanted me to see it, I told him. Everyone else could look if they wanted. He nodded, kept working. I spent Wednesday afternoon at the library. $2 in quarters, printed the tax records, the deed, the city notice, a cover letter I typed on their machine because I did not have a printer. I read the cover letter 3 times before I printed it. Then I read the printed copy twice more. Every word felt like a small brick I was carrying toward a wall I could not see the top of. I walked home in the rain, papers under my jacket. Everett met me at the door with a thermos of soup, chicken and rice, store-brand crackers on the side. He did not ask what the papers said. He just handed me the thermos, told me to eat first, then read. I ate, then I read. Then I laid the papers on the cutting table, smoothed them flat, weighted the corners with pin cushions so they would not curl. Grandma used to weight her patterns that way. Small habits become larger habits, become the way you build a life. Thursday morning, bank, 9:30. I wore Grandma's navy jacket. It fit at the shoulders but was tight through the sleeves. I had taken it in at the elbow the night before. 2 hours of hand stitching by lamplight. Everett found me at midnight still hunched over the fabric. He warned me I would ruin my eyes. I told him they were already tired. He shook his head. That was not the same thing. The banker's name was Delphine Marchetti. 40 years old, maybe a little more. Short gray hair, glasses on a chain. Nothing on her desk except a coffee cup and a pen. Her office smelled like paper and the ghost of somebody else's perfume. She read my file for 11 minutes. I counted. Then she took her glasses off, folded them into her palm, and walked through it slowly. I had a repair plan drafted, not approved, a former customer paying alteration fees, but no lease, a building with a city notice, and no cash reserves. I confirmed each one. She looked at me. Any bank in this county would say no to what I was asking. I held her eyes, asked why she had taken the appointment. She smiled a small, tired smile, because she knew Everett Kilroy, and he did not send her people who were going to fail. She wrote a number down, slid it across. 36,000. Rehabilitation note, secured against the shop. First payment in 6 weeks, interest higher than I wanted. I looked at the number, I looked at her. Then I signed, right there, not because I understood every line, but because Grandma had signed something at a county counter 3 years earlier, and it had held, and this had to hold too. Delphine watched me sign, then she added one warning. If my tenant walked, the note called, so I should not lose the tenant. I did not have a tenant yet. I did not tell her that. I walked back to the shop in the rain, papers under my jacket. Everett met me at the door. He looked at my face, did not ask, just held the door open, wrote it on the chalkboard. Day 22, bank, yes. Then underneath, fine tenant. The next morning she came. I was pinning a hem when the dark blue car pulled up outside. I saw it through the front window. A woman stepped out, read my sign, then looked past it, straight into the workroom, straight at the long cutting tables. She tried the door. I met her outside, told her I was not open for walk-ins yet. She corrected me. She was not here for alterations. She handed me a card, cream-colored, raised lettering, Rosalind Ferrier, Regional Costume Cooperative. The name arrived a second before the recognition did. I had seen this card before, or one exactly like it, half burned along one edge, in the bottom of Grandma's sewing box, under the oil bottle, with a note in her handwriting. This girl called 3 times. Have not called back yet. I looked at the card in my hand, then at the woman in front of me. 40 years old, dark hair, pulled back coat with square shoulders. Nothing warm about her face, but nothing cold either, just measured. She told me they had heard my grandmother's tables were still here. I did not know what to say. Rosalind saved me the trouble. Explained a former customer had posted a picture of my sign. It had reached one of their production managers. I looked past her at the long tables through the window, asked if she wanted alterations. She wanted production space. I did not answer, because production space was not a phrase people used about my grandmother's shop. Cutting tables, power, storage, loading. Not a storefront. Rosalind kept going. They already had those things. What they did not have was a location within 70 miles of Springfield with tables that size and a courtyard. I stared at her. She stared back. I asked for how long. 5 years, with options. I asked about rent. She paused, looked past me at the shop. Once repairs were complete, $3,400 a month, $3,400 a month, for rooms with buckets in them, for a shop the family had called worthless, for the workroom Weldon had called salvage. I did not say anything, because if I opened my mouth, I was going to cry. Rosalind saw it, asked if she could see the tables. I told her the public could not come inside. She corrected me. She was not the public. She was a potential tenant. I offered her a thin joke. The city would still count her as a person. Small smile. First one from her. Fair. I unlocked the courtyard gate instead. We walked through the alley, entered the rear loading area. Weeds through the pavement. Cracked concrete. The gate hinge orange with rust. She measured. Photographed. Asked what I would load through the gate. I turned the question around on her. Rolling garment racks, fabric bolts, trunks, sometimes scenery pieces. Nothing that needed a truck dock. How many people, I asked. 6 regular. Up to 12 during a build. Overnight late near opening dates. Sometimes midnight. I looked up at the upstairs windows. She followed my eyes, guessed I was living up there. I dodged, told her I was keeping an eye on the building. She acknowledged that was not what I had said, then reassured me the upstairs would not be part of the lease. Good. She looked through the rear glass at the long cutting tables, at Everett's workbench, then at me, asked when my inspection was, within 10 business days. If the front room passed, that helped. I nodded. She walked me through what they would still need. Rear electrical work, roof, locks, fire separation, better lighting in the courtyard. I pointed out she had already made a list. She told me she had come to look because they were already looking elsewhere. That had changed things. I asked how much time I had. 2 weeks to show her the property could work. After that, she moved on another site. 2 weeks. The rehab loan was signed. The roof was scheduled. The electricians were ordered. I could do this, unless the courtyard was not mine. But I did not know that yet. Not then. Not standing in the rain with Rosalind Ferrier watching me with her measured face. I told her the courtyard came with the building. She wanted me to show her. She left through the alley. I stood there, held her card, watched her car pull away. Everett came out, saw my face, guessed who it had been. I confirmed it. Rosalind. He had known she was coming. Sort of. He had known my grandmother had done work for people connected to that group. He had not known they would send someone this fast. I told him the number, $3,400 a month. His hand went still on his tool bag. He did not smile, because he understood before I did. 3,400 a month meant the shop was not a burden. It meant the shop was worth more than the house. It meant Grandma had not given me a broken building. She had given me a working one buried under damage that scared people off. She had given me the thing my brother had called a liability, except I did not own all of it yet. The property description, the one Marceline had signed, the one Weldon had initialed. It ended at the rear wall of the workroom. The courtyard had its own parcel number. I did not know that then either. Not yet, but I would find out. I wrote the day on the chalkboard. Day 15, Rosalind. Yes, but. Everett read it. Did not ask what the but was for. The customer came the next afternoon. Silver hair pulled back, wool coat buttoned to the collar, 66 maybe, a pair of navy trousers over one arm. She stood outside the front window reading my sign for a long minute before she noticed me watching. Then she asked if I was open. Not exactly. She glanced at the city notice. Told me she only needed these shortened. I offered to take them at the door. She nodded. Marked the length with a safety pin. I measured both legs. Quoted $14. She handed me the trousers and $7 in cash. Would pay the rest when she picked them up. I wrote a receipt using Grandma's old ticket book. The woman folded her copy into her purse. Then she looked at me for a long moment. Confirmed I was Odessa's granddaughter. I nodded. She had wondered what had happened to her. I did not know what to say, so I said nothing. The woman kept her eyes on my face, told me quietly that my grandmother had saved her life. I stopped writing, apologized without knowing what for. She kept her hands folded together to make them still. Then she told me the story. In 2005, her husband had died in June. Heart attack, 58 years old. No warning, her voice did not shake, but her hands did. She had not had money for the funeral, not for the burial, not for a dress. She had not worn black in 20 years. Nothing fit. Nothing was right. She looked at the front window, told me she had come in here on a Wednesday afternoon. She did not know why she had picked this shop. She had not been here before. She had just walked in. She had not been able to move. She wiped her cheek with the back of her wrist. My grandmother had taken her measurements, not said a word about money. 2 days later, my grandmother had given her a black dress, a jacket, a blouse, all of it. Her eyes filled. She had asked what she owed. My grandmother had told her to go stand beside him on Sunday and look like she belonged there. That was how she honored him. The rest of it did not matter. The trousers were still in my hand. The woman wiped her cheek again. She had come back every year, not for anything big, just something small, a hem, a button, so she could pay her back, slowly. My grandmother had never taken what she owed. She would add a stitch and charge her $2. She smiled, broken, beautiful, told me my grandmother would be so proud of me. I could not answer, because I did not feel like I deserved it, because I had not been there when she called, because I had been folding sweaters at a store that was already dying, while my grandmother had been quietly changing other people's lives. I asked her name. Prudence. Prudence Ellery. I told her mine. She already knew. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small handkerchief, handed it to me. I had not realized I was crying. I took the handkerchief. She told me I came from good stitching, sweetheart. Then she walked away. I locked the door, laid the trousers on the cutting table, stood there for a long time. Then I went to work. I unpicked 6 inches on the first leg, pressed the fold, adjusted the guide, re-sewed. The second leg went cleanly. When I finished, the hems matched. I hung the trousers in the driest part of the front room, placed the $7 inside the sewing box. Then I opened the receipt book, because Prudence had made me want to look. Because if she had come every year, other people must have too. Because Weldon had said the shop was a liability, and Prudence had said the shop had saved her life. And those 2 sentences could not both be true, not about the same building. I turned the pages back, slowly. Grandma's handwriting changed over the years. Sharper in the 70s, rounder in the 80s, slower in the last 5. But the entries never stopped. Sarah Whitcomb, wedding dress hem, $20. Paid 1 basket of tomatoes. Dolores Baird, nursing uniform 3 shirts. No charge husband laid off. Marlene Costa, funeral suit altered from her father's. $2. She paid 3 anyway. Line after line, page after page. Some paid, some not. Some paid in things that were not money. A jar of honey. A repair on the shop's back porch. A promise to stop by Sundays. I sat on the floor of the front room with the book on my lap. Read for an hour, then 2. Everett came in around 6 with a paper bag of sandwiches. He saw me sitting there, sat down beside me without asking why. I told him she had been running 2 shops. He shook his head. She had been running 1. I clarified. He knew what I meant. He knew exactly what I meant. I turned another page. She had been running 1 shop that made a little money, and she had been running another shop underneath it that never showed up on paper. Everett nodded slowly. She had called that shop once. To him, she had called it the second book. The second book. I asked where it was. He looked at me. His face changed. Not quite recognition. Something quieter than that. He did not know, he admitted. But if it was anywhere, it was somewhere she thought Weldon would not look. I did not answer, because I already knew. I did not know I knew. Not the way you know a fact, but the way you know a shape in the dark. The way you know a stitch when your fingers find it before your eyes do. Somewhere in the office, a rectangle waited under a fabric arm. I looked at Everett. He shook his head. Not tonight. Not tonight. We ate the sandwiches at the counter, turned the page of the receipt book together, kept reading. By the end of the night, I had found 47 entries with no charge listed, just the work, and a name, and sometimes a note in the margin. Widowed, 2 kids, baby coming, rent late, grandmother in Georgia, just needs to feel like herself again. I closed the book, set it inside the sewing box, wrote on the chalkboard. Day 13, she was running 2 shops. Everett read it, nodded once, went home to sleep. I did not sleep much that night. I sat on the folding cot with Grandma's receipt book open on my knees. The lamp warmed slowly. Rain tapped the upstairs window at a different rhythm than the front room. I thought about the first time I had watched her work. I was 7. I had been sorting buttons by color into small dishes. She had been hemming a graduation gown. Ivory silk. The girl who owned it was already crying by the time I got there. Something about her mother not being able to afford it. Grandma had not made a face, had not said anything at all, had just taken the girl's hand, held it, then let go, then went back to hemming. An hour later, the girl left with the dress in a bag. I asked Grandma later how much she charged. She had told me some prices you could not say out loud. I had not understood then. I understood now. The next morning, I made a call I had not planned to make. I called Marceline. I told her about Rosalind. I did not tell her the number. I told her there was interest. I told her it might be enough to save the shop. I told her I needed her help with something. She asked what. I told her I needed her to check if Grandma had any tax records for the rear parcel. The line went quiet. Then she asked what I was talking about. I told her. I had looked at the tax notices in the office last night. There were 2 of them. One for the shop, one for a smaller parcel behind it. Longer silence. I said her name. She told me she had to check the estate file. She would call me back. She did not call me back for 6 hours. I spent those 6 hours in the office, on my hands and knees, looking through every drawer in the desk, every folder, every box of receipts, every metal cash box with the paint chipped off the corners. I found the tax notice again. Read it 3 times. The parcel had its own number, its own assessed value, its own line item. Small, $212 a year. Behind it, taped to the inside of a folder, was a receipt. County Recorder's Office, dated 3 years ago, a recording fee, $15, Grandma's signature on the bottom. I stared at that receipt for a long time because Grandma had not been driving 3 years ago. Her license had been revoked after the second fall. Marceline had driven her everywhere for the last 4 years of her life, which meant Marceline had driven her to that office, which meant Marceline knew. Marceline called at 3:15, told me she had checked the file. The settlement used the property description from the shop's main tax record. I knew. She had not checked for a second parcel. I knew. Long pause, then she pushed the hard part across the phone. The residual estate, anything not listed in the settlement. That went to Weldon. I sat down on the office floor. The mannequin was 2 feet away, cotton sheet folded around its base, 4 screws soaking in penetrating oil for the third day. I asked her directly, had she driven Grandma to the county recorder's office 3 years ago? The silence was different this time. Not calculating, not defensive, just quiet. Like a person who has been holding something for a long time and is deciding whether to set it down. She told me she needed to come see me. Tonight, I told her. Tonight. She came at 7. Coat buttoned wrong, estate file against her chest. She had been crying in the car, not so anyone would notice. But her mascara was gone, and she was not wearing lipstick. Marceline always wore lipstick. I unlocked the door, did not turn the sign. She saw the workbench, saw the fresh ceiling tiles, saw the 2 hanging garments, saw the receipt book on the counter with 50 little scraps of paper marking pages. Reminded me that the room was restricted. I reminded her it still was. For customers. She could stand by the door, I offered. She was not a customer. That was what Rosalind had said, I told her. Everett coughed into his hand. Marceline sat at the fitting chair, opened the file. Her hands were steady, but only barely. She had found the original deed for the main shop lot, the tax card, the settlement, copies of Odessa's recent bills. The shop description stopped at the rear wall. The courtyard had its own parcel number, so it had not been included by description. I asked what that meant. It meant she explained the parcel had not been listed in the estate inventory. I asked whose fault that was. She looked at me, told me it was hers. I had not expected her to say that. She kept going. She should have caught it. She had been tired. She had been rushing. Weldon had been calling her every day about the house. I had been saying I was fine when I was not fine. Grandma had left her a stack of paper 3 inches thick. She had used the tax record from the shop's main file. She had not cross-referenced. She had not checked. She swallowed, told me she had made a mistake. Everett did not move. I said her name softly. She told me there was more. I waited. She looked at Everett, then at me, then she told me. 3 years ago, she had driven my grandmother to a county office. The floor went quiet under me. She had had papers, Marceline explained. She would not let Marceline see them. She had been tired. She had needed help standing at the counter. She had called Marceline over to steady her, and Marceline had heard her ask the clerk whether the courtyard would stay with the person she named, even if the shop went through probate. I stopped breathing, asked what the clerk had said. Marceline's voice was thin. The clerk had told her a properly recorded beneficiary deed would control the parcel when she died, as long as she signed in front of the notary and had it witnessed. I asked if she had. Marceline nodded. There had been a notary at the counter. 2 clerks had stood as witnesses. She had seen her sign. The notary had stamped it. Then he had stamped it again. Then she had paid the recording fee. Silence. I could hear the bucket dripping in the front room. I could hear Everett breathing. I could hear my own heart. Somewhere far away. I asked whose name. Marceline closed her eyes. Mine. Everett lowered his head. I could not move. Told her she had never told me. She had not. She had never told the attorney either. She confirmed it. I laid it out. She had known 3 years ago that Grandma had gone to a county office, And she had known last week when I had asked her if Grandma had ever talked about the courtyard. And she had told me Grandma had used it with the shop. She acknowledged all of it. I asked why. She could not find the envelope, she told me. She had not known if Grandma had finished it. She had not known if it was still valid. And by then, I had already signed the settlement. If she had raised a document she could not produce, Weldon would have said she was favoring me. The attorney would have reopened every file. The whole thing might have stopped. And she, she stopped. She could not finish. I said it for her. She had been afraid. She looked at the floor. Yes. Everett stood up, went to the counter, poured a paper cup of water, brought it to her. She took it, did not drink. I told her to look at me. She looked up. I laid it out for her the way she had laid the estate file out for me. She was the person Grandma had called when she needed a ride. She was the person Grandma had asked to drive her to that office. Grandma had trusted her, not because she was brave, but because she was the only one who would show up every time on time. Marceline's eyes filled. Grandma had trusted her, I repeated. But she had needed one more thing from Marceline. She had needed her to tell me, and she had not, because she had been scared of Weldon, and she had been scared of the paperwork, and she had been scared of everyone being angry at her. Marceline put her hand over her mouth. I told her I was not going to yell at her. I was not going to threaten her. I was not going to tell the attorney tonight. I was not going to make her sign anything. She wanted to know what I would do. I told her I wanted her here on Sunday morning when we opened the Mannequin, because whatever was inside had come from Grandma, and Grandma had trusted Marceline to see it. Marceline wept openly, in a fitting chair, in a shop that had once been my grandmother's world. Everett looked away, gave her privacy. I softened. She did not have to speak. She did not have to defend me. She just had to be there. And after, if it was a real document, she would tell the attorney what she had seen, what she had heard. That was all. Marceline nodded. Then quietly she told me she did not deserve to be there. I reminded her nobody in this room deserved what Grandma was about to give us. That was how gifts worked. She looked up at me for a long time. Then she murmured that I sounded like her. I did know. She left at 9:40, walked to her car, did not look back. Everett locked the door behind her, turned to me. Sunday, he confirmed. Sunday. I wrote it on the chalkboard. Day 6, Marceline knows. Underneath, Sunday. Open. Weldon showed up 2 days later. Did not knock. Front door. During customer hours. I was pinning a jacket sleeve at the door for a woman named Estelle, who had walked in that morning asking if I did clergy vestments. She was picking up her order. Her husband was a Baptist minister with a shoulder problem. Grandma had made his stole 3 years ago. He had never known where it came from. Estelle had never told him. I finished the last pin as Weldon came in. I waited by the counter until Estelle left. Then he laid a printout on the counter. Tax record, rear parcel, Odessa Halloran, still active. He had checked the county records, he told me. Grandma had owned it when she died. The settlement assigned residual estate to him. I set down my pincushion, told him he had called Marceline. She had called him back, he corrected. I pointed out she had told me she would not. He shrugged. She had told him she would not tell him about my tenant. She had not said she would not tell him about the parcel. He was proud of that, which in the moment made me want to slap him. But I did not. I asked why he was there. To tell me not to sign anything with Rosalind. I told him he did not get to give me instructions in this building. He argued if that courtyard belonged to the estate, he had a say. I dared him to prove it. He looked around, at the clean ceiling, at the lit fitting area, at the 2 garments hanging behind the counter waiting for pickup. Something in him shifted, not softened, shifted. The way a man's face shifts when he realizes the thing he called worthless is worth something. He asked how much she was offering. I told him that was between me and the potential tenant. He pushed. How much, June? I told him he would hear what I wanted him to hear. He picked up the tax printout, folded it, slid it into his jacket. At the door, he stopped without turning. Then he told me Grandma had said something. I froze. Asked what? He turned slowly. 3 years ago, she had told him she was going to leave something for me in the shop. She would not say what. She had just said there was something in there for June. When she was gone, I could not move. I kept going. He had looked for it after she died. Before I got here, he had gone through every drawer in that office, every box in the cloth room. He had checked the freezer at the house because she had been known for hiding things in freezers. He laughed, bitter. He had never found anything. I could hear my own heart. So he had told himself she was talking about the memories, that she had meant something sentimental because he could not find anything else. And Grandma, when she was old, she had said a lot of things. He looked past me at the office door, which was closed, behind which the mannequin waited. I did not follow his eyes. I did not move, because if I moved, he would look, and if he looked, he would know. But then, all of this. He gestured at the shop, the parcel, the tenant, the lease. And now he was wondering out loud, what if she had been talking about the courtyard? I said nothing. What if she had left me something on paper? I stared at him, told him carefully he had just admitted he had spent 3 years looking for something Grandma had said she left for me, and that he had never told me she had said it. He did not answer that. He could not, because there was not a good answer. I had known for 3 years that my grandmother had promised me something, and instead of telling me, he had searched for it alone so he could find it first. And when he could not find it, he had convinced everyone that the shop was a liability, so the settlement would give him the safe things, the house, the cash, the known quantity, and I would get the burden. Except Grandma had known him. She had known he would search. That was why she had not put it in a drawer. That was why she had not put it in a freezer. That was why she had sewn it into the one thing Weldon would never think to open, the one thing that had been sitting in the front window the whole time, watching him every time he walked past. I looked at my brother, and I understood for the first time in my life exactly who he was. He was not a bad man. He was a man who assumed the world had been arranged for his convenience, and when it was not, he rearranged it quietly, patiently, without malice, which was worse than malice, because malice you can name. I told him he needed to leave. He tried to protest. I cut him off. Now. Something in my voice was new. He heard it. He left. I locked the front door, turned the sign, sat down at the cutting table, put my head in my hands, sat there for a long time, until I heard Everett knock at the back. I let him in. He took one look at me and figured out what had happened. I confirmed it, asked how he had known. He had worked next to my grandmother for 30 years. He knew that boy. I told him Weldon had looked for 3 years. Everett nodded. Sounded about right. I laughed, short, not funny. Told him Weldon had never found it. He knew, because she had known he would look. Yes. He sat down across from me, told me quietly that had been her sense of humor. I laughed again, but it turned into something else, and Everett did not try to stop it. He just handed me a paper towel from the counter. Waited. I dried my face. Then he told me Marceline had called him that morning. I asked when. Early, before I was up. I asked what she had said. She had told him she had found something. I went still, pressed him. What? She would not tell him on the phone. She wanted to come Sunday. I looked at him, asked if he knew what it was. He had a guess. I told him to tell me. He hesitated. Then he laid it out. 3 years ago, my grandmother had gone to a county office. Marceline had driven her. He remembered because he had been here. He remembered Marceline coming back afterwards to pick up a package my grandmother had wrapped for her. And he remembered my grandmother coming into the shop the next morning, carrying a long envelope in her handbag. I stopped breathing. The next morning he continued. The mannequin had been gone from the front window. I stared at him. She had moved it into the office, put another form in the window. He had asked her why. She had told him the shoulder had gone bad. He met my eyes. The shoulder had not gone bad. I whispered his name. He knew. The mannequin. He knew. That was when she had done it, he thought. We looked at each other. The rain had stopped. The shop was very quiet. And upstairs in the dry room under a cotton sheet, with 4 screws now loose in a small dish beside it, the mannequin was waiting. I walked to the chalkboard, wrote the date, wrote the words. Day 2, Sunday morning, opened the mannequin. Everett stood behind me, said my name softly. I turned to him. Whatever was in there, he reminded me she had left it for me. But it was also for her. She had waited 3 years. She had trusted the fabric. She had trusted us to find it right. I promised him we would. The rain started up again outside, slower now, almost polite, as if it were trying not to wake anyone. I locked the front door, turned off the front lights, left the small counter lamp on, so the mannequin waiting upstairs would not feel like it was being left in the dark, even though it was upstairs, even though it could not feel anything at all. I climbed the stairs, sat on the floor next to the cotton sheet, ran a finger along the diagonal seam, halfway down, where the rectangle waited. Then I whispered, 2 more days, Grandma. I promise. Downstairs, the last bucket caught the last drop for the night, and the number on the chalkboard did not blink. Day 2, Sunday. Weldon called at 9:40 on Friday night. Not to me, to Marceline. He did not know she was already sitting at my counter drinking cold coffee, watching me pin a customer's blouse. Her phone lit up. She turned it face down. It kept buzzing. She let it ring itself out. Then she looked at me. I told her she could take it. She shook her head. Too fast, which meant she already knew what he wanted. The phone buzzed again. She turned it back over, read the screen, did not answer. I said her name. She met my eyes and told me she needed to tell me something, and she needed me to hear it before Sunday. I put my pincushion down. She laid it out. Weldon had called her that morning. He wanted her to co-sign a loan. I asked what for. The house, second mortgage, $22,000. Everett from the back room went still. I could hear him stop moving. 22,000, I repeated back. She confirmed it. I pressed. What for? Sports betting, she told me. He owed an offshore book. He had been rolling the balance since the fall. She said it like a person who had been rehearsing the sentence in her car all afternoon, trying to find a way to say it that did not sound like the end of something. I asked when he had told her this. Yesterday. He had said he could pay it back in 6 months if he could just get past the current cycle. He had said if she did not sign the book, would call his employer. He could lose his real estate license. He would lose everything. I sat down slowly on the edge of the cutting table, told her he had never told me. He would not, because he never told me anything I finished for her, because she added quietly, I had always been the one who had it together. I laughed once. Ugly. Marceline waited until I looked at her again. Then she told me she had not signed it. She had told him no. The room was very quiet. She kept going. He had yelled. Then he had cried. Then he had called her a coward. Then he had hung up. He had called her 11 times today. She had not answered. Everett came out of the back room, wiped his hands on a rag, did not speak, just leaned against the door frame, where I could see him. I asked Marceline why she was telling me this now. She held my eyes, told me because on Sunday he was going to walk in that door and act like he still had options. And she needed me to know he did not. So when I looked at him, and I decided how much room to give him, I was deciding with all the information. I stared at her. She was done, she told me. She had carried too much of this too quietly for too long. She was done doing that. The phone buzzed again. She turned it off, put it in her purse. Then she stood up, buttoned her coat, told me she would be here at 7:50 on Sunday. Then she walked out. Everett watched her cross the sidewalk to her car. She got in, sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel, then drove away. He looked at me. I asked if he had known. He had known he was thin. I pressed for meaning. Weldon had come by the shop last month, Everett explained. He had been asking my grandmother's old customers if any of them had cash for sale on the mannequin or the machines. I stared at him. He had not told me because he had not thought it was a story yet. Just a bad afternoon. I told him it was a story now. He agreed. I sat there for a long time. Because the man who had convinced the family the shop was worthless was drowning in money he did not have, made from bets he did not win, and he had never told a single one of us until it caught up to him, which meant when he showed up Sunday, he would not be there to fight for the courtyard. He would be there because he had nowhere else to be, which changed everything about how I would open the mannequin. Not because I owed him softness, because I owed my grandmother the woman she wrote the letter for, not the sister of a man who had once been an easier version of himself. I did not sleep Saturday night. I sat upstairs in the small room with the desk and the lamp, the scrap of cotton I had sewn my first straight line on, waited with a button, not moved for 3 weeks. I opened Grandma's notebook. I had found it under the bottom tray of the sewing box a week earlier. I had not told anyone, not even Everett, because it was mine first. She had written on the first page, "This is not a diary. This is a place to remember things I do not want to forget." I turned the page. The straight seam needs a straight heart. Do not rush a stitch that is going to hold weight. Measure twice. Cut once. Same in cutting cloth as in cutting words. I turned another page. Half the notebook was recipes. Half was fitting notes for customers. One page had a list of birthdays. My name was on it. So was Weldon's. So was Marceline's, my mother's. And in a shakier hand at the bottom, Grandma had underlined it. Then at the back of the notebook, folded in half, a single sheet of stationery. My name on the outside, June. I opened it slowly. June, my girl. If you are reading this, you have come to the shop, which means you kept a promise I never asked you to make. I am going to ask you something now. Do not rush. Do not cut. Do not tear anything open in a hurry. There is something in the shop for you. You will know it when you find it, because it will not be where anyone would look for a document. Trust the person you brought in to help you. If you brought Everett, you brought the right one. If you brought Marceline, do not punish her too long. She has been carrying more than any of us know. Weldon, if he is there, let him see it. Let him be in the room. He will not thank you, but he will remember that you let him be there. Someday that will matter. June, whatever you find, it is yours. Not because you asked for it, because you did not. You are the only one who never asked. That is why I chose you. I love you today and always. Grandma. I read it 3 times. Then I lay down on the floor, on the cotton sheet next to the mannequin, and I cried. Not the pretty kind, the other kind. The kind that comes out sideways because it has been waiting for months, for years, for the phone call I did not answer, for the shift I picked up, for the funeral where I did not cry, for the settlement I signed while my brother watched. I cried until my throat hurt. Then I lay very still. The lamp buzzed softly. The mannequin stood over me. I whispered up to the ceiling, "I am here, Grandma. Sunday morning, 6:30, first light." The rain had stopped for good. I was already downstairs. I had made coffee in the office kettle Everett had cleaned, laid a fresh muslin sheet across the cutting table, set out 4 chairs, one for Everett, one for Marceline, one for Rosalind, one for Weldon. At 7:15, Everett knocked, travel mug in hand, small bag over his shoulder, fresh document sleeves, cotton gloves, the magnifying lamp. He looked at the chairs, looked at me. His eyebrows lifted. He had noticed I had called him. I explained without apology. Grandma had told me to. He nodded once, set his bag down. At 7:52, Marceline arrived. Coat buttoned correctly this time. Estate file in her canvas tote. Face pale. She stopped in the doorway. Told me she had brought the attorney's letter. I asked what for. Confirming what she had seen, what she had heard. She did not want to speak from memory. She wanted to speak from record. I nodded. At 7:55, Rosalind Ferrier's dark blue car pulled up. She got out, walked to the door with a clipboard behind her. At 8:12, Weldon's truck. He got out, walked to the door, looked at me through the glass. I unlocked it. He came in. He did not say hello. He looked at the four chairs. He looked at the office door. He looked at me. Then he told me I had started without him. I shook my head. I had waited. I picked up the seam ripper. The room went quiet. Everyone sat down. Grandma's notebook was on the counter behind me, her handwriting on the page inside the cover. Do not rush a stitch that is going to hold weight. I opened the office door, brought the mannequin out, set it on the muslin, lifted its right arm, slid the point of the ripper under the first diagonal stitch. I looked at Everett. He nodded. I looked at Marceline. She was already crying. I looked at Weldon. For the first time in my life, he did not look angry. He looked afraid. I lifted. The thread parted with a soft, quiet snap. The first stitch parted. Nobody moved. I slid the ripper under the second one. Lifted. Snap. Under the third. Lifted. Snap. Everett held the fabric with 2 fingers, steady, barely breathing. Marceline sat with both hands pressed together, not praying, just holding, the way you hold something so it does not fall. Rosalind had put her clipboard down. She was not taking notes anymore. Weldon was still standing. He had not sat down. He had not moved since I picked up the ripper. His hands hung at his sides. His mouth was slightly open, like a boy watching his mother open a wrapped present. Except he already knew the present was not for him. I kept cutting, slowly. Each stitch was small. Each one had been placed by my grandmother's hand 3 years before she died. And now, one by one, I was undoing what she had done, except I was not undoing it. I was following it. That was the difference. You could cut backward through her stitches, or you could cut with them. Same movement, different direction. She had left a trail. I was just walking down it. Halfway down the seam, the edge of the inner pocket appeared. I heard Marceline breathe in sharply. I kept going. 4th from the bottom, 3rd from the bottom, 2nd last stitch. I lifted. Snap. The repaired flap loosened, but did not fall. Grandma had turned the cloth inward before sewing it closed. So even after the seam opened, the fabric held, like a book that had been shut for a long time and needed to be opened by hand. Everett looked through the magnifying lens, whispered that the covers were holding. I put on the cotton gloves. Then, with 2 fingers, I opened the flap. Inside, sewn to the lining, was a narrow cloth pocket. And in the pocket, a cream-colored envelope wrapped in a clear plastic sleeve. I drew it out slowly. My hands were shaking. The envelope was legal-sized. On the front, in my grandmother's handwriting, 1 word, June. Marceline pressed her hand over her mouth. I set the envelope on the muslin, photographed it front and back, every angle, because that was what Everett had told me to do, because whatever was inside might need to be proven later. Then I slid a small blade under the tape. Grandma's initials crossed the edge in blue ink. The tape lifted cleanly. I opened the flap. Inside was a single folded document, and underneath it, another envelope, smaller, also with my name. I took out the document first, unfolded it. At the top, printed capital letters, beneficiary deed. Underneath that, my grandmother's name, Odessa Halloran. Then the legal description of the rear parcel. Then in the beneficiary field, June Halloran. At the top corner, a county recording stamp, dated 3 years earlier. The date matched the day Marceline had driven her. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Weldon spoke into the muslin, his voice thin, told the table that did not prove anything. He said it like a man who wanted to believe it. I looked at him, not angry. I looked at him the way you look at a boy who has just found out the game he was playing was never a game to anyone else. I said his name. He pressed on. Anybody could have put that in there. Everett spoke without looking up. He had watched me cut it open. Weldon shot back that did not mean the paper was real. Marceline pushed the file toward him. She had seen Grandma sign it. He turned to her, accusing her of saying she had not seen anything before. She held her ground. She had seen the notary stamp it. She had seen Grandma write her name at the counter. She had seen the two clerks who had signed as witnesses. She had not told him 3 years ago because she had not known what Grandma was doing. She knew now. Weldon tried to trap her in the contradiction. She had been telling one story, now she was telling another. She met him head on. She had been telling half a story. She was done doing that. He looked at her for a long time. Then he sat down, finally, in the chair I had set for him. He did not argue anymore. He put his hands on the table, palms flat, like a man steadying himself against something moving underneath him. I set the deed aside, picked up the second envelope, the smaller one, the one that had been underneath the deed. June. Again, in the same steady hand. I opened it. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, written on the good stationery Grandma had kept in the top drawer of her desk for as long as I could remember. The kind with a faint watermark of a magnolia in the corner. I unfolded the first page, started to read, except I could not. Not out loud. Not yet. I read it silently first, because it was mine. She had written it to me, and I needed to have it just once before I shared it with the room. June, my girl, if you are reading this, I am gone. Do not cry too long. I had a good life, because I had you. The parcel behind the shop. I bought it with money I saved over 20 years. One button, one hem, one suit at a time. I did not buy it because I wanted more land. I bought it because I knew someday you were going to need a place that belonged to you. Not to your brother, not to your aunt, not to anyone who could take it away. I know Weldon. I love him. He is my grandson. But he does not understand the value of silence. He does not understand why a straight stitch matters. He will sell what he can sell. That is not his fault. That is how he is built. I know Marceline. She is a good woman, but she is frightened. She has always chosen the smoothest road. I forgive her before she needs to be forgiven. Tell her that. She will need to hear it. I know you. You are the light of my life. You sat on that stool for hours when you were 7 years old, sorting buttons by color. And you never once asked to be thanked. You stitch slowly, but you stitch with your whole heart. That is the thing I could not teach anyone. You already had it. Do not sell the parcel. Do not split it. But do not keep it because of me. Keep it because you have earned a place to stand. And June, forgive your brother, not because he deserves it, because you deserve to live without carrying anger in your body. Anger is heavy. I carried it once for a year after your mother died, and it made me smaller. Do not let it make you smaller. I loved you today. I will love you always. Grandma. I set the pages down. I was crying. I did not try to stop. Marceline was crying. Everett was crying, though he was pretending he was not. He kept touching the corner of his eye like he was moving a piece of dust. And Weldon. Weldon was looking at the letter. His face had gone very still. He spoke to the tabletop, asked me to read it out loud. His voice was different now, not sharp, not defensive, just small. I checked him with my eyes. Was he sure? He nodded. I read it out loud, slowly. I paused at the parts where I could not get through them the first time. I paused at the part about him. I paused at the part about Marceline. I paused at the part about forgiveness. By the time I got to the last line, I loved you today. I will love you always. Weldon's head was down. His shoulders were shaking. He was not crying loud. He was crying the way men cry when they were not taught how. Small, hard breaths, face turned away. Nobody said anything. We just let him do it, because it was the first honest thing he had done in that shop. Maybe in years. I put the letter down, put the deed on top of it, looked at Rosalind. She had been quiet the whole time. Then softly she offered a name. She had a title examiner she trusted. He worked out of Springfield, Callum Whitfield. He could be here by 10. I nodded. She stepped outside to make the call. Marceline took the letter, read the part about her again, whispered that Grandma had forgiven her before she left. I confirmed it. She apologized to me. Small, broken. I told her I knew. She promised she would do better. I told her she already was. Callum Whitfield arrived at 10:15, 47 years old, patient face, carried a laptop bag and a portable scanner. He shook my hand, washed his hands in the bathroom, sat down at the cutting table. He set the tone for himself. He was not deciding a family dispute. He was identifying the document, verifying the recording, confirming the chain of title. That was his job. I told him that was all I needed. He examined the deed under Everett's lamp. First the paper, then the notary seal, then the recording stamp. He typed the book and page reference into the county system. The indexed entry appeared on his laptop. Grantor, Odessa Halloran. Beneficiary, June Halloran. Property parcel matching the description of the rear lot. Notary of record on file. Witnesses 2 on file. He compared the legal description line by line. Every boundary call matched. He looked around the table. The recording he told us was valid on its face. The notary and witness information was consistent with the county's records. Under Missouri law, this type of deed passed the named property outside probate. It became effective on the date of the grantor's death, before the estate settlement had been executed. He turned to me, walked me through next steps. I would want to file an affidavit of death and update the assessment record. Those steps documented what had already happened. They did not create ownership. Ownership had been created 3 years ago on the day this deed was recorded, and it had taken effect 1 month ago on the day my grandmother died. He looked at Weldon, not unkindly. Any challenge to a recorded deed went through the courts, would need to show fraud, forgery, or later revocation. He had found no revocation recorded against this parcel. That did not foreclose a challenge, but it did mean the parcel was titled in my name today. I could not speak. Marceline reached across the table, took my hand. Everett put a hand on my shoulder. Weldon stared at the deed, then at the letter, then at me. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. She had known he murmured to nobody in particular. I confirmed it once. Then I let the rest of what he needed to say come out of him without my help. He kept going half to himself. She had known he was looking. She had put it in the one place he would never open. I did not answer that. He did not need me to. His head kept shaking, slow, like a man trying to loosen something in his neck. Then he said her name. Grandma. That was all he said. Not I am sorry, not I was wrong, just her name, like an apology to a woman who was not there. But I heard it. He stood up, walked to the front door. At the door he turned back, told me he would leave me alone. He did not say for how long. He walked out. Rosalind waited a moment out of respect. Then she brought us back. She needed to take this to her board today. I nodded. But then something in her face changed. She looked at the muslin, at the mannequin, still lying on its side, because we had not stood it back up, because there was still one thing left. She said the word softly. The base. I echoed it. She looked at Everett. He was already reaching for his tool bag, because during the reading of the letter, he had loosened the last stubborn screw, quietly, without saying anything, because he had been working on those screws for 3 weeks and had felt the fourth one give an hour before Weldon walked in, and he had not wanted to interrupt. He set the mannequin on its side, removed the 4 screws, one by one, laid them in a small dish, lifted the round metal plate off the base. Underneath, Inside the hollow cast iron cavity, a leather-bound notebook, thicker than the sewing box notebook, thicker than any single book I had ever seen my grandmother handle, bound with a green cotton cord that had faded to pale gray, wrapped in oiled paper, sealed at the edges with a thin ribbon of the same black cloth tape she had used to repair everything else in the shop. Everett murmured that he had never seen that in his life. Marceline breathed something I could not quite hear. A prayer. Maybe not. I lifted it out, set it on the muslin, untied the cord, peeled back the oiled paper, slowly. Because if the pages inside had been sitting there for 30 years, I did not want to be the one who tore the first one. The cover was hand-stamped, in careful block letters, just 3 words. The second book. I opened it. The first page was dated August of 1972, her 3rd year in the shop. The entry read, Elena Makovich, wedding dress, refashioned from mother's dress. Bride's mother died in March. Bride is 20. No charge. Family sent me a jar of pear preserves in October. I turned the page. Robert and Doris Farr, choir robes. Their son's memorial service. No charge. Doris came back 6 months later and offered to clean my windows every spring. She did, until she moved to Tulsa in '78. I turned the page. I could not stop turning pages. Each one was a name, a garment, a reason, a payment column that was mostly blank, or filled with things that were not money. A basket of tomatoes. A tuning of the shop piano nobody remembered had been there. A promised prayer. 2 hours of shoveling snow, a pound of pecans. Some entries were longer. 1983, Dolores Baird, nursing uniform, 3 shirts. She left the state prison in April after 7 years. No family to meet her. Needed clothes for a job interview at the county hospital. She got the job. Sent me a Christmas card every year for 18 years. Stopped in '98. I called the hospital that January. They told me she had died in October. I read that one twice. Marceline was reading over my shoulder. Made a small sound. Not a word. I told her to keep going. I turned another page. 1991. Rita Ellsworth. Fire on Willow Street took everything. Rita and 2 children moved in with her sister. I made new dresses for the girls from a bolt of blue cotton I had been saving. Coat for Rita, no charge. Rita's sister brought me a peach pie a week for 2 years. Then, halfway down that same page, underlined, Rita's oldest daughter came in last week to be measured for her graduation gown. She did not know I had made her first dresses. I did not tell her. I closed my eyes for a second, because that was what Grandma had done. Not just made the clothes, she had never taken the credit. Marceline was reading with tears running down her face, now openly, not trying to hide them. She turned another page. Her hand touched a name, whispered something about a friend named Ida, 2 years gone. She had never known Grandma had. She stopped, could not finish. I nudged her along without words, just a small lift of the page. We kept going. 217 entries. I counted later. I did not know it then. I only knew that every page had a name. Every name had a story. Every story had a moment where a person walked into that shop with nothing and walked out with something. Not always clothes, sometimes dignity, sometimes just the feeling that another human being had seen them and had not looked away. Prudence Ellery was on page 14. 1979, widow. Never came in before that week. Husband died at 58. She could not afford a black dress. I made her 3 garments, no charge. She has come back every year since. She always tries to overpay. I always find a way not to let her. I set the notebook down because I could not read anymore, because I was full. Everett watched me a long moment. Then he named it out loud just for me. I echoed him. This was what she had been doing. He held my eyes and confirmed it. Marceline sat back in her chair, wiped her face with the flat of her hand, which was not something Marceline had ever done in her life. Then she named it too. Grandma had been running a second shop underneath the first shop, and the second shop had been the real one. Rosalind had been standing very still. She stepped forward, told me she needed to ask me something. I looked at her. She spoke carefully. This notebook, 200 entries, 30 years. Would I consider letting the cooperative fund a monthly workshop here, taught by Everett, for women in situations like the ones in this book, free of charge, as part of the lease terms? I looked at Everett. He was already crying again. Or still, it was hard to tell. I agreed. One word. Rosalind promised to write it into the contract. She would call her board that afternoon. I offered one condition. She invited me to name it. I laid it out. The workshop was not charity. It was a class. The women got skills, not handouts. That was how Grandma would have wanted it. She nodded once. That was what she had had in mind. I looked at the second book, told the room I wanted to add pages. Everett tilted his head at the word. Add. Every woman who came through the workshop, I explained. Her name went in the book. Same format, same handwriting style if I could manage it. Because this was not the end of the ledger. It was just the part Grandma had finished before she had to go. Marceline reached across the table, took the book gently, held it against her chest for a moment, then set it back down. She murmured that Grandma would like that. I knew. Rosalind stepped outside to call her board. Everett and Marceline and I sat at the table. We did not speak for a long time. The rain had started up again outside, slow, almost welcoming. 6 weeks later, I was cutting a bolt of navy wool at the long back table with Rosalind's production manager, a woman named Ines, 29 years old, 2 rings in one ear. Kind eyes. I looked up because I heard something. Weldon was standing on the other side of the courtyard gate, wool coat with a torn pocket, head bent slightly. I walked over. I did not unlock the gate. He lifted the coat. He had a coat. I looked at it. The pocket was torn along the top seam. 6 inches, maybe more. I told him I had a workshop starting at 11. He knew. I offered him the option. He wanted to sign up. He confirmed it. Yes, I set the price. $25, paid in advance. He took a folded 20 and a 5 out of his wallet, slid them under the gate. I picked them up, told him front door. He nodded. I walked around, came in the front, sat at the workshop table, sat at the end of the row beside Prudence Ellery, who had signed up for her second class in a row. Prudence looked at him, then she looked at me, then she looked back at him, then she named him for what he was. He was the brother. He confirmed it. She surprised him, told him she was sorry. He blinked, wanted to know what for. She held his eyes, for all of it. Then she turned to Everett, asked him to show her the whip stitch again. Hers kept pulling loose. The room understood. Everett taught. Weldon tried. His first stitch was too close to the tear. Everett shook his head. That was not going to hold. Weldon protested. It looked fine. Everett shook his head again. It would not after he used the pocket. Weldon rolled the logic around aloud. So it looked fine now. Failed later. Everett offered the class a small, tired smile. That was how everything looked. Weldon pulled the thread out. Started again. Everett corrected him 3 times. Weldon corrected himself the 4th. He kept his head down, did not look at me until the class was over. Afterward, as everyone was leaving, he stayed, waited until the door closed, until it was just him and me and Everett. He said my name. I waited. He told me he had read her letter again. I nodded. He worked it out with me, the part about being built a certain way. I nodded again. He kept going. He did not know if he could change what she had seen, but he could stop pretending she had been wrong to see it. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I told him that was a start. He asked if it was enough. I did not soften it. Not yet. He nodded. Did not argue. He brought the other thing up. The 22,000. I told him that was his work. not mine. He acknowledged it. He had paid off 9 of it. He had sold the truck. He had moved into a room above a bakery on Hollis Street. I did not know what to say. He clarified without prompting. He was not telling me because he wanted credit. He was telling me because if we were going to be family, I should know where he actually was. I acknowledged it. He confirmed the next month. Same time, I confirmed the price. $25, paid in advance. He acknowledged the terms. He left. Everett watched him go. Then he murmured that she would have liked that class. I asked which part. He answered without looking at me. The part where he had paid. I laughed for the first time in a long time. The affidavit was filed. The parcel record was updated to my name. Callum's report stayed with the deed in a fireproof box I bought at the hardware store. The bank released the last of the repair funds. The cooperative moved in for their first production build in February. I stood in the courtyard the morning they came. Ines rolled out a garment rack through the gate. 1 inch of clearance. She looked at the gap. Named it. 1 inch. I named it back. 1 useful inch. She laughed, rolled the rack through. The upstairs rooms filled up slowly. A mattress on the bed frame. Sheets from Grandma's closet that Marceline had refused to keep. A kitchen table Weldon brought over one Sunday afternoon after checking the attic list. He signed it off before he moved it. Then he moved it. In the borrowed truck. Up the stairs. Into the small kitchen. He did not ask to see the rest of the apartment. He did not ask for anything. He just set the table down. Made sure it was level. Then he left. Rosalind donated 2 chairs the cooperative was not using. Everett repaired the loose joints but refused to paint them. Told me chairs should admit they had been sat on. I gave it back to him. So should people. He accused me softly of reading her notebook. Every night. He liked that. The last chapter was not about a shop. It was about a mannequin. Because after all the repairs, all the invoices, all the classes, all the lease signings, all the tax filings, after all of it, there was still an open seam in the office, under a right arm, waiting. One Saturday afternoon in April, at closing time, Everett came into the office with a spool of matching thread and a fine needle and a small pair of scissors from Grandma's box. Told me it was time. I knew. He set up the magnifying lamp, positioned the mannequin. The pocket was empty now. The rectangle was gone. The deed was in the fireproof box. The letter was on my nightstand upstairs. The second book was in a glass case Rosalind had built for it in the workshop room, where every student could read a page before class. But the mannequin was still open, the way she had left it, after she recorded the deed, the way she had left it, so that only one person someday would find it. I sat down at the workbench, threaded the needle, looked at Everett. He offered the obvious choice, same stitch as hers. I disagreed, straight. He raised his eyebrows, wanted to know why. I explained. I wanted anyone who ever looked at this mannequin to know 2 things. That she had made a repair, and that I had finished it. Different stitches, same seam. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he told me it was a good answer. I started. Small stitches, straight, through the fabric, along the last 3 inches of the diagonal seam, so the top of the seam still showed her stitching. The locked backward pass, uneven now, worn thin, but hers, and the bottom 3 inches were mine, straight and even, not hiding what had happened, not covering it, just closing it. When I was done, I tied off the thread, cut it clean, ran my finger along the seam. It held. Everett looked at it, told me she would approve. I knew. We stood the mannequin up. Rosalind had dressed it in a fitted green wool jacket the cooperative had made from leftover costume fabric. Everett had checked the sleeve length, made her adjust it by 1/2 inch on the right side, because he was Everett, because sleeves matter. We carried the mannequin back into the front window, set it down, turned it slightly so it faced the street. We stepped back. The window was clean now, dust wiped, glass polished. The mannequin stood in the fading afternoon light. Green wool jacket, slightly lifted right arm. The diagonal seam visible only if you knew to look for it. Everett approved. It was good. Good. I named it. It was ready. The reopening was small. Saturday afternoon in May. Warm. The dogwoods along the street had bloomed. I had not sent invitations. Just word of mouth. Just Prudence telling the women in her book group. Just Rosalind telling her board. Just Marceline telling the women in her office. Just Everett telling the two men he still played dominoes with on Tuesdays. 23 people came, which was more than I expected, which was more than I could fit inside comfortably. So they spilled out onto the sidewalk. Prudence brought lemon squares in a plastic container. A woman named Sarah Cook, 72, brought a fabric bag full of buttons in every color. She said her mother had collected them and she had been meaning to donate them somewhere. I told her this was the somewhere. She hoped so. Everett sat at his bench and let people look at his tools. He talked to two of the older women about pressing techniques. He told the same story about my grandmother spilling tea in his drawer 3 times. Each time slightly different. Each time was better. Marceline refilled a coffee pot in the office kitchenette she had set up. Inez gave a mini tour of the workroom, explained what the cooperative did, introduced her production manager to a woman who taught costume design at a community college 2 towns over. Weldon came late. He came with a small hammer and a folding stool. He walked to the wooden platform under the mannequin without asking anyone, and quietly reinforced a loose corner where the wood had split. He did not say anything to me while he did it. He just did it. When he was done, he put the hammer back in his jacket pocket, looked at the mannequin, looked at the diagonal seam, then quietly, so nobody else heard, he told me it was a nice stitch. I asked which one. He answered without looking away from the mannequin, the straight one at the bottom. I looked at him. He looked at me. Then he walked over to Prudence Ellery and asked her if the lemon squares were still available. That was the closest we got to a full conversation for a long time. It was enough. The sign outside kept my grandmother's name. Underneath Odessa's alterations, I added 3 lines. Alterations, costume production, community workshops. At the bottom, in the smallest letters, written by me, painted the following week by a sign painter who charged me $40 and refused to take $50. Since 1969, still stitching with the whole heart. That is what she used to say. That was her line. That night, after everyone had gone, after the last coffee cup was in the sink, after Marceline had kissed my cheek at the door and reminded me she would see me Wednesday, after Everett had waved at me from his truck and driven off, after Weldon, who had stayed until nearly the end, had folded up his stool, nodded at me once, and left without saying anything else. After Rosalind had locked the courtyard gate and dropped her keys through the mail slot with a note that just said thank you, I stood alone in the shop. The lights were off except for one behind the counter and one inside the display window. The mannequin stood in the window. Green jacket, straight shoulders, seam repaired. I walked upstairs, made a cup of tea in the small kitchen on the hot plate, in the mug with the blue measuring tapes painted around the rim, which Marceline had brought over one Wednesday, without asking, without explaining. She had just set it on the counter and told me it should be here. I brought the tea to bed. On the nightstand was Grandma's notebook. I opened it to a page I had bookmarked with a scrap of ribbon. She had written in her steady hand, "Every stitch has a season. Some are quick. Some take years. Some take longer than a life. Trust the fabric to know which." I read it twice, set the tea down, closed the notebook, turned off the lamp. I lay in the dark for a long time. I thought about my grandmother in a county office 3 years before her death, standing at a counter, signing a paper she would not tell anyone about. I thought about her walking home, carrying a long envelope in her handbag, opening the shop early the next morning, locking the door behind her, sitting down at a mannequin, threading a needle, making a diagonal seam that would hold for 3 years, through leaks, through storms, through a funeral, through a family meeting, through the day I signed away my inheritance for what looked like a burden, through the night I first laid a hand on it. She waited. She trusted the fabric. She trusted me. Downstairs, the mannequin stood in the window under the low light. Two kinds of stitches on one seam, hers and mine, both holding, neither hiding what had happened. I turned onto my side, closed my eyes, and for the first time since she died, I slept the whole night.